Hey guys, so FL Studio recently introduced scripting for MIDI controllers. So this video we're gonna talk about how you can script your own controller even if you've never scripted anything before. I highly recommend checking out a Python tutorial beforehand because it's gonna make a lot more sense listening to what I am about to show you. Hold on. There is actually a great tutorial here.
Take on that.
So it does last 4.5 hours, but I think it's gonna make, if you watch all of that, it's gonna make it a lot easier to create your own scripts for FL Studio, because it's basically, all of this is just fundamentals of Python and understanding how the language works. It's not hard, it's pretty easy once you go through the whole video. It's easy to understand. You maybe something will feel a bit quirky, but as soon as you try it out, you write one script and it's gonna make a lot more sense. So we're gonna do this video as if you already watched that video. If you didn't, just go there and watch it and then come back to this video. It does take a long time, but in the end it's really worth it, because then you can just use any controller that you have and just adapt it to FL Studio to do whatever you want. So it's an awesome feature, and in my opinion it's really worth it. It's really worth it to learn. So without further ado, let's get into it. And the way we're gonna show you guys how it works is I'm gonna go through a script that I wrote for this Nano Control Studio controller, and you're gonna see basically how it works and what the most important things are. So if you didn't before, I highly recommend going to this page here in FL Studio, basically online manual, and bookmark it, because you're gonna reference that page a lot. So the most important parts of it are actually this one here. So these are parts in FL Studio that you can control with your controller, and when you click on one of them, you get all commands for that particular module. And what that is gonna do is, once you assign one of these functions to a Midi message that you send with your controller, it's gonna enable you to do, for example, mute a track that's at the index in a playlist module. So essentially what would happen is this here. One of these would be muted according to the index that you sent, that you wrote in the script. So I'm gonna go ahead, and here you can click edit script and it would open it, but it would open it in Notepad, and that's okay. You can work from Notepad as well. You can write a script in Notepad, it doesn't really matter. You just have to save it as py. So let's go back. Let's assume that you just got your controller and you have no idea what you want to do, or actually you have an idea what you want to do with it, but you never scripted before and you don't know where to begin. So the first thing that you would do is you would go to your, hold on, let me show you. You would go to this this here path, and you would create a folder for your new controller. So in my case, this was Korg Nano Control Studio. You just create a folder and name it according to the name of the controller. It doesn't have to be really specific. Nothing's gonna be wrong with that. And then inside, you go here and you click new, and you make a text document, and you write device and then underscore, and then you type whatever you want. So for example, this Korg Nano Control Studio, and you change this last bit into py. So I'm gonna call this tutorial Obviously it's not the same, but I'm gonna call this tutorial just in case. Say yes, and it's gonna turn it into a py file. Now I have a program installed on my computer that's called PyCharm, and it's used to write Python basically. So when I double click it, I already connected the extension to be opened in PyCharm. So when you double click it, it's gonna open in PyCharm, and here you can see the same thing that you saw when we opened the file in Notepad, except that in this program you can also see color codings in different colors. It makes it easier to see if your code is okay or not. Okay, these are just some basic things inside here. So we open this new file that I created, and of course it's empty, there's nothing inside it. So when I go out, let's open the real one. I'm just gonna delete this one because we don't need it. I was just showing you how to create it. So you created it, and now we open it. And you might do this in PyCharm, you can do this in Notepad, it doesn't really matter. For me it's just easier to open it in this program. And the program is free, by the way. You can download it from you can download it online. And here the first line of code would be this, and you would type it for any controller that you are using, no matter what. So you just type a hashtag, and normally it would be a comment, but here FL Studio actually reads this, and the name you specify here is the name that it's gonna show you. Hold on, it's gonna show you here. So where is it? Here. So this is the script that we are editing right now, and it's gonna add user in the end, so you know that these are user scripts and not some scripts that come with FL Studio. I'm not even sure if these are scripts, it's just the way that FL Studio handles different controllers. Okay, so next thing, so let's suppose you wrote this thing, and now you can go and you should see your controller in these here. You open this by going to options and then MIDI settings, and you should see your controller in here. By the way, if you didn't, you need to save this before we are able to see it in here. And then you can just, if your script is not appearing here, you can just exit and come inside, and it should be visible in here. So you connect your controller to the script that you just created, so Quark Nano Control Studio. And then you go here, view and script output, and it's gonna open this here window. Now I have also a complete control M32, so it's showing me scripts for those as well, because I'm running scripts for that MIDI controller as well. And here it's gonna initialize your script, and if everything is okay, it's gonna say init okay. So considering that you just created your script and you don't have all of these codes inside, it would just say okay, that's the name of the script that you typed in here. So let's say you just have this first line, and it's gonna say okay, initializing is good. It shouldn't throw any errors at this point. So next thing that you want to do is obviously you want to control something. So the way that works, let me show you again this thing here. So the way that you control anything in FL Studio, so when you click a button on your MIDI controller, it sends a MIDI message, and that message is made of different parts. So oh, here they are. Okay, so a MIDI message, whenever you press a button or move a control on your controller, it's gonna send a message to FL Studio, and that moment is considered an event. And all of these things inside are data that is sent in that event. So I know it looks really confusing, but you don't actually need to know all of these. So the most important one are actually data 1 and data 2. And what those are saying is if your controller, what control on your controller did just send a message. So data 1 says which one, and data 2 says what value. So if you go here, I made it easier inside these. Let me just find the part of the code that, okay, so this looks really confusing, but it's actually quite simple. So what this does is, this is a function that I created. It's called print MIDI info. So whenever there's an event, so whenever there's a MIDI message sent from the controller, it's gonna print all of this. So it's gonna print all of the data that are important basically for handling that MIDI message. And first one is handled. This one is gonna show, hold on a second, this lamp here. If the event is handled, then this lamp would be orange. If the event was not handled, then the event would be green. So what that means is that event is handled, there is nothing else to do with that. So if you want to assign any controls on your controller the manual way, you can do it normally with this and then link to controller, but only if it's not handled. And when I press anything, now it's not gonna show anything because I disabled the line that calls this function in here, print MIDI info. But if we remove it and we just minimize it, there's no need to save it if you're working inside PyCharm. That's why I like it more than Notepad as well. And then we reload this script and it's gonna say init okay, but this time whenever you press something, it's gonna print out all of these. So wait, let me just put them all in one line. So all of this is gonna be printed to your script output. So the first one is handled and it says 0. That means it's not handled. If this number was 1, then it would mean that it is handled. So essentially it's true or false. Timestamp, this one I didn't understand what it does and I don't think it's relevant for the control anyway. Status is the number that differentiates notes between controls. So when I press this controller doesn't have any note keys, but if it had note keys, it would essentially send, I think it's 127 would be this number, and then you would know, oh, okay, so this is a note. Data 1. So all of these buttons on this controller are actually assigned with a number, with a control change number, a CC number, if you will. So this number, this is the number right here. So when I press play, so this is how the program knows that this is a play button. It has a number 80. This number can be anything, and your controller probably has something like this. So here we have this chord control editor, and when we open it, we click this, and you can actually change the number here. So if your controller has something like this, then you can adjust this number by yourself, and you can tell it whatever number you want. And then it's gonna make it easier for you to write a script if this number is already, if you already know what that number is. If not, then you just press it and it should show you. And you can, if you want, you can copy this little bit of code here. So all it does, it's gonna show you all of this data. It's gonna print it out in the script output in FL Studio, and then you will be able to see what it is basically. So that's data 1. Data 2 is actually the value of the knobs. So when I press play, it once sends 0 and once sends 127. I don't think it's relevant for this particular because it's just a play button. So wait, let me find. Here's the stop button. Here is the play button. So transport start when the data is 80. It doesn't even look at data 2, so it just looks at event.data1. So if event data 1 is, press the play button and then check if it's already playing, then you should we're gonna get to that. So essentially it's not relevant for this particular button. Okay, the next part is this port, which I don't think is relevant either. It would be if you... Okay, I don't think it's relevant. You shouldn't worry about that. Sysex. Now this one is kind of relevant. If your controller has buttons like Shift, or this one has a button that's called Scene. So when you press Scene, it sends a Sysex message. As you can see, when we pressed play, there was none. It wasn't a Sysex message. But this time, when we press Scene, it sends this bit of code. So whenever we press it, and this controller has like 5 different modes that you can put it in, and for each mode it's gonna send a different message, but only this part here is gonna be different. So here is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on which mode it currently is in. Your controller might have that as well, and this part of the data, so Sysex would be the only part that you could use to handle that data, to do something with it inside FL Studio. So next part is Midi Id, and this part should be responsible for the same thing that this status part is responsible. So as you can see, it has a number 240, and that's also a sign that it's a Sysex Midi message. I don't know why it's throwing this big number here. I have no idea, but it's irrelevant actually. You can just use status. If you're using just a controller that doesn't have notes, that only uses control changes, then it's not relevant at all. But don't worry about it so much. It's fine. So okay, so we went through all of this, and as I said, the main parts are actually data 1 and data 2. This is how you're gonna know what message is sent and what value that message was. So that's when you press play, it's just gonna send the data 2 is just gonna be 0 and 127. Sometimes it's just gonna be 0. Sometimes there's not gonna be another value. But if you have a fader, then it's gonna send a whole bunch of messages. If you just pull that fader down, and this fader here controls the master track. For every bit that it climbs up until it reaches the top, it's gonna send a message until it comes to 127, and when you go down, it's gonna go to 0. Okay, so whenever it changes this data to value, it's gonna send a message. So it's gonna send 127 messages that the computer will actually handle, or you're gonna write it in your script for it to handle. Okay, so that's also worth noticing. And now let's get back to scripting. So these things here, these are called script events. When you press something, it's gonna run some of these functions. Okay, so when you press a play button, some of these will run automatically. And in your script, you should define what these are. So they are not defined by default. They are pretty empty. When you send something, nothing is going to happen unless you specify what should happen. Okay, so I did something here when for example, you can define what happens when a Sysex message comes in, and I defined something here. I essentially made it able to for the script to remember what mode the controller is currently in, and depending on that, then you can do all sorts of things. But if you're just trying to control one button, then you just come here, you define this thing, you find out what the event data for that button is. So for example, for the play button, the event data is 80, and then you type this. If event data is 80, then you do something with it. So if it was a play button, then you would just do this. So, but you need to keep in mind that whatever you're doing in FL Studio, all of these functions need to be imported before you start scripting. And here you have all these imported modules from FL Studio that contains all of these things. So all of this. So for example, the playlist module has all of these, and if you want to use it, then you need to import the playlist module. the safest thing is to import all of them, which I don't think it's really the correct way of doing it. I don't know if you're just doing too much. If you're importing all of them, maybe there's no need. Maybe that's somehow bad. But I imported it nonetheless because it's easy. Then I covered it, and I don't have to worry if I imported them or not. So when you import them this way, you're gonna be able to use all of those functions inside. So let's go back to the hold on. So here, so if the event data is 80, then you just do something. So whatever you want to do with that, so you can just come in here and browse this page and find out what all of these do. Sometimes it's gonna be complicated to understand. Like for example, I'm still not understanding some of these parts down here, because I wanted to be able to make my script control stereo separation on a track. So that would be this button here. I wanted to be able to control that, but for some reason I have no idea how to do that. And this thing does mention stereo separation here. So that's mixer stereo separation, but I'm not sure how do I use this. So if anyone knows that, you're more than welcome to share that information with me. Most of these are actually pretty self-explanatory. So if you go to the transport module, starting and stopping is really quite easy. Just remember to always pass, because this was bugging me when I was writing the script, always pass something, even if it's nothing. You have to open and close it. I guess it's how Python works, because this start function is expecting some parameters to come in, so otherwise it's not gonna work, or it's gonna work buggy. So yeah, that's it. And I mean, all of these, this is basically the whole script is based on that same concept. So if event data is something, then you do something else with it, okay? And you find out here what you can do actually. And if you have any questions, like, feel free to drop them in the comments, or to go to the FL Studio scripting forums. Like, guys over there may be able to help you, like people who have tried this. As you can see, we used when you watch that tutorial, that Python tutorial, this one, there's a part here where they talk about, hold on, 2D lists, and we actually use that here because I wanted to be able, because this controller only has 8 faders, and I wanted to be able to control more than 8 tracks in an FL Studio mixer. So the way I did that is I defined what those tracks are. So I defined 8 groups of what it can control, and I wrote them down. So all of these numbers are actually mixer tracks in FL Studio. And by the way, if you have the same controller, you can just download the script from, hold on, I opened this by mistake. You can just download the script for this controller from FL Studio forums, and you can use it. And then inside the script, you just change what tracks on the mixer you want to control with your controller, basically. So the way I set it up is that whenever I press right, it's gonna change the group for the for these knobs to control faders. Sorry, knobs as well. They control panning. So this is the first group. I set it up to be this thing here. It might be confusing, but this is how I have set up my FL Studio. Hold on, let me close this. So the way it works, the first one is the master. The 3 next ones are actually buses. So drum bus, instrumental bus, and a vocal bus. And then the 3 next ones are the send channels on the right. So these here. So for example, if you have reverb on send 1 and you just want to remove all of your reverb, you just do this and it's removed. And the last one is the recording one. So you can just, for example, go here, press record, and it would arm it for recording, and you just press here and it would arm it for recording here as well, and then you just press play and you can record something, right? I'm not gonna do that now. But yeah, and then if you just switch it to the next one, then you can do this like you normally would. And they are set so that when you go to the top, they end up at 0, so nothing goes above 0. If you want to do that, you can do it manually, or what would be a better way is to go in here and just put in any plugin that can handle volume and just put it up. So yeah, that's it for the basics. Let me just see if I missed anything. So yeah, basically what scripting comes to is handling the event data 1. So finding out what the event data 1 is and then doing something with it. And then don't forget to set the event handle to true, so FL Studio knows that, okay, this is doing something. There are also things here. This is a bit complicated code, but essentially what I wanted to code here is because you have more of these faders, so instead of coding every particular fader one by one, you just type in, okay, so this one is for the faders 91 to 98. So basically that means, did I change it right now? I did. So if it's 91 to 98, so if those are faders, then you just do this code. And I know it looks complicating, but what it does is actually it's calling the mixer module. It's setting the track volume according to, and you need to provide it two parameters. So the first one would be the index. So essentially the first one would be what track on the mixer, and I defined it with this thing here. So this thing here, it calls the class that is controller, and controller inside of it has a list, that was the 2D list that I was talking about, that's called fader map. So the first value that you, so whenever you call a 2D list, you need to provide two parameters. First one defines what list inside that 2D list you want to call, and then the second one is what index inside that list you want to call. So the reason that this here says controller.current fader group is because you have 8 groups, so it would go between 0 and 8. So depending on which group you're currently on, and you can just select them with this, or you can just select them with these arrows. So for example, this would be group 0, because in coding everything starts with 0. So this would be 1, 2, 3, all the way to 7. So this thing here, the current fader group, it would be a number between 0 and 7. And then the next one would be event.data1 minus 91, which means that it would call one of those. So let's say, for example, that we were in a, I lost it. Let's say, for example, that we were in the group, I don't know. So that's the group number 4, essentially 5th group, but it's number 4. And then you would go here, and you would find out what is the 5th group, okay? And let's say you moved the 4th fader here. It would actually it would check what the 4th fader is in here. So that's 28. So the way this code works, hold on. Where is it? I lost it. Here it is. So it would take the event data, and event data is either 91 or 92 or something up until 98. So the event data is, in this case, would be 91, 92, 93, 94. So it would say 94 minus 91, and it would give you the value of 3. And 3 is the fourth element in the group here. I know it sounds confusing, but it's really not. It's really easy once you understand how it works. So it would call on this one, and it would pass it this value, right? And then I keep losing this thing. Hold on. Where is the code? Where is the? There it is. Okay. It sends this as the first parameter. So because this set track volume needs to know what track, and this is the way it defines what track. So it looks what the current group is and what is the event data that was sent to it, and then it defines, okay, what track do I need to control. It finds this with this thing here, and then it needs to know, okay, what do I need to set this track volume to. So it looks at the event data, and because the event data is a number between 0 and 127, we need to transform that mathematically to something that would set the fader to a correct volume. So this is the same as finding out percentage of something that's not, for example, let's say that this number was, I don't know, 127. So 127 divided by 127 would be 1, and then we multiply it by 0.8 so that it maxes out at this point here. Hold on. So that it maxes out, that it doesn't go above, because this is 0.8. So that's how we define that value. So it's not 1, it's a number between 0 and 1. So you can just put any decimal number, or it's called a float number inside here. So this is how we defined. And for example, if this number was somewhere at half, it would just send 0.5 times 0.8, and then it would set it accordingly, right? So this is how we calculated actually what number it has to send. So that's it, guys. I don't want to drag this tutorial like too far away, because there is a lot that we could talk about, and I could go over the whole script and it would last too long. But hopefully you understand now how the scripting works. So if you want to, so let's just summarize it. If you want to make your own script, first thing you need to do is obviously create the folder structure where I showed you, and inside create a text file that you just rename to .py file. And then the first line, you type this in here, and depending on what you want to control with your script, you import those modules. I guess you don't need to import all of them. If all you want to do is being able to control transport in FL Studio, so play, record, and etc. Okay, so you import the modules that you need, and the next thing would be just to, you can like start right away, like define, if it's a control change, you just type define on control change, and then you pass it this event, and you find out what the number is of the control, and then you specify under it what you want to control according to the Python coding structure, right? So all ifs need to have a semicolon, is that what it's called, after that, and yeah. So basically the rest of the code is just the same. So it's if this then that. It's the basics of coding essentially. It's nothing really hard. How you're gonna handle it and how you're gonna handle problems that you run into might be a bit complicated, but that's the fun part, right? That's why it's so fun to create these scripts. That's why you're probably watching this video right now. So So that's it, guys. I hope I helped you. And if you have any questions, just drop them down in the comments. And I think this is gonna be it for now. So see you in another video. Bye.